when people are saying I'm not doing well at work-life balance, in an immediate time, sometimes it's going to be overwhelming,
Sure.
and that's okay. And so I think you kind of have to accept that as well
In
and
this
look
moment,
at it
not
at
a
that
generalization.
moment.
Yes.
Right. When it's not working, can you outsource? Can you do it worse than perfect? Can you not do it at all? What really matters, because you can't possibly do everything, but you gotta just accept that.
Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe, and share this episode with a friend or colleague if you like it, and I know you will, because today is going to be fun. I am your host, Owen Lefebvre, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Today's guest, Lauren Weiner, is the author of a new book, Unruly. Lauren is also the founder of WWC Global, a management consulting firm that provides expertise in strategic planning, financial management, information technology, exercise planning, and program management, primarily for federal and defense-related clients. She helped grow that to $100 million in annual revenue before selling it in 2022. She's a University of Michigan grad. Won't hold that against you. But Big Ten, PhD in psychology from Dartmouth College, and is a loud and proud hockey mom. So we share hockey in common. A lot of hours on the ice, being a 10-year coach myself. So Lauren, welcome to Money Market.
Thank you so much for having me, Owen. This is so exciting.
I know, I'm excited to have you because I think the book in particular, and we'll get to the book. I want to start with your background first, but I mean, you're really finding some challenging and ingrained cultural norms that you're trying to push again, which, I mean, there's a lot of tension there.
Yes.
But I do want to start with, WWC Global, huge success.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of take me, so you start this company, you sell it a couple of years ago. I mean, tell me about that journey.
Yeah. So I was working in the White House. And
what were you doing in the White House?
I was a policy analyst. I was a career staffer. So I got to go from Clinton to Bush 2 and span both of those, which was amazing.
Yeah.
So cool to be able to go through a transition, in particular, kind of see the policy from both sides, and implement policy on both sides. And I'm apolitical when it comes to anything work related. Like I'm very much...
Job's the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And policy is policy. And probably 90% of policy honestly doesn't change from administration to administration. So that was amazing. It was a great job. I met my now husband, and he was about to ask me to marry him. We were going on a cruise, and he was either going to ask me to marry him, or, as he jokes, I was going to shove him off the ship, which is probably true. And
the clock was ticking.
Right, exactly. I'm like, come on. So he, the day before we left for the cruise, he got a call from his old boss in the Navy. He had been an Army officer, but had moved over and was a civilian for the Navy, got an offer to go to Naples, Italy. And this was 2003. So it was right as Under the Tuscan Sun came out. So I was like, Tuscany.
Let's go to Italy.
That sounds great. So he said yes. We got married in 4 days,
Wow,
which was actually wonderful, because then I had no stress whatsoever after 4 days. And we found ourselves overseas, and I couldn't get a job when I got there. So I don't do well sitting home. We didn't have kids, obviously, yet. And
Were you in a Tuscan villa? I mean, could you start a winery?
It was Naples, which is not Tuscany.
No.
So there was, we landed.
Not what you pictured.
Oh, God. We landed, they picked us up, and they took us the back way to my husband's new office before they took us back to shower or anything like that after an overnight flight. There's a huge dumpster that was in front of the alley. And it's Naples, so there's a trash strike. So there's trash overflowing from the dumpster.
Welcome to Naples.
For 3 blocks.
Oof.
And it's on fire. So I looked at my husband and I'm like, you literally brought me to a dumpster fire. And it just got worse because I couldn't find a job. They wouldn't let you have senior level jobs on base, and you couldn't work off base. So I ended up just starting this firm just as a kind of placeholder for me to do some consulting, hour here, hour there, whatever, back in the States until I could get home.
Okay.
And instead somebody said, wait a second, you're smart. Can you do something for me? Whatever, literally at that point, whatever you need me to do. And it was anti-terrorism force protection.
Okay.
No idea what this is. Sure, let's make it happen. And by the time we got the contract in place, they were like, hey, can you do another half-time position? The woman who had incorporated the company for me was a friend of mine. She came along and she became employee number 2 and ended up being my business partner. And then it kind of went on from there. They said, hey, wait a second. How did Tony get you guys? I want another one of you. So that first couple of years, it was like organic, catch as catch can. You want to do something? Sure, we could do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, whatever comes in the door,
sure,
we'll figure it out.
So I think by the end of the second year, we were probably 15 people over probably 5 or 6 time zones.
Wow.
And so, and then we got more strategic and we grew from there, and we kind of kept going, and we ended up getting to $100 million in annual revenue, which was
incredible.
Not what we ever intended to do.
No, incredible success. What is the tie-in to, I guess, the whole tribal element of that?
So there's a weird kind of quirk in government contracting that small businesses are defined in a very specific way around the NAICS code, or the kind of industry standard code. Except there is a loophole around, not a loophole, but just a different definition around tribal organizations. They can have multiple subsidiaries that are not considered affiliated.
Okay.
And so when we went to sell, because we had these specific small business contracts, we really had a limited population of buyers that could buy us. So we knew we were looking mostly at tribals because they were the only ones that could buy us and not automatically grow out of status.
Interesting.
So it was a weird quirk of the way that it worked, but I loved the fact that we ended up with a tribal. The reason for them being there, the reason for them making money and doing good stuff, it really kind of fit with our way of thinking. And so I was thrilled to end up selling, particularly the tribe we did.
No, well, it sounds like it all worked out the way it was supposed to. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. Starting right out with the front of the book. So retired U.S. Army General Stanley McChrystal.
Yes.
Who, how do you know him? How did you get him? I mean, that's an amazing. You send me this book, and I look at the forward, and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. So Stan is a really good friend. I've known Stan forever. His West Point roommate is one of my mentors for probably the last 20 years. Just after we started the firm, I met Jake. He introduced me to Stan. And Stan's just been a huge blessing to me. I called him when I had just started like typing, writing, just as almost therapy. When we sold the business, it was just, let me get all of these. No, I mean, I was working really hard, but it was just all this stuff in my head about leadership and how we had gotten where we were was just in my head, and I needed to get it out. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Mm-hmm. And at one point I looked at this, I mean, it was probably 150 pages by the time I had gotten it all out of my head. And I looked at it and I'm like, I think this might be a book. And I emailed Stan and said, hey, can I get it in your calendar? And, got on the phone with him, and I was like, sir, I think I might have a book in me. Am I crazy? And his response was, oh, you're definitely crazy, right? But yes, you have a book in you. And so he's kind of Sherpa'd me through this process. He told me what I was going to love about the process, which was the writing. He told me what I was going to hate about the process, which was the marketing.
Oh, I thought he was going to say editing.
No, the editing was fine. I loved every bit of writing this book and revising it and doing, because it's kind of the way that I think and the way that I enjoy. I mean, I love writing, but the social media, this kind of stuff I love. Mm-hmm. It's the trying to find followers, all of this stuff that I'm not comfortable in, but it's cool to be bad at something, because I've been good at GovCon for so long, because I've been in it for 20 years. So it's really nice to actually kind of push the envelope and not be great at something for a little while.
Well, they say everybody has a book in them, so good for you for getting it out.
Yeah.
In terms of like going through the publishing process, I mean, what was that journey like?
So I did things unruly because that's what I do.
That's what you do.
So I got myself into really smart people who know the industry really well. I have a phenomenal editor who basically made the entire process much better.
Amazing.
That book is so different than what I started with to what I ended with because of Nancy.
Okay.
And she kind of shepherded me not just through the writing, but the whole industry. But we ended up not using an agent, which I don't necessarily recommend anymore after having done this, because there's a lot here that's different. But we ended up, she dropped my book proposal to Matt Holt Books. Matt Holt is the CEO, and he is phenomenal. He looked at the proposal and he was like, "Yep, let's go." And so I think 3 days later I had a book contract, and 4 months later I had the book in their hands, ready to go.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
well
and
done.
Then 11 months later it's actually getting published, but that's okay.
But you're here.
Right,
You
we're
birthed.
here now.
It
We're
was
here
birthed.
now. Yeah.
So July 1st, it is out.
1st.
What does the junket look like? I mean, do you have that laid out yet?
Tampa first, and we're having a big old party here in Tampa for all my friends and family. And so there's a place on my website to request an invitation if anyone wants to go. That's on the 26th of June. So we're having a big old party there. And then I'm flying back to where I grew up, which is Detroit. And we're doing a couple of different things in Detroit, which is awesome. One of my friends is doing a pop-up thing at her boutique called Some Girls Boutique. And so it's a kind of women supporting women with a bunch of other women-owned businesses there. Then we're doing another big old party in Detroit for all of my friends. And then we're doing a book reading. I'm going to Dallas. I'm going to San Antonio. We're going to Denver. We're going to Chicago. And then DC and probably Norfolk are going to get planned later when things calm down a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a journey.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
No, I'm excited for you. So
Yeah.
Good luck with everything.
Yeah.
So talking about the book.
Yeah.
So when is it appropriate to look at rules as a starting point versus an end point? Because, I mean, there are things like, I think of like engineering and law and medicine that, I mean, it could be irresponsible if we're trying to bend and break rules.
So I look at this and I say that you always have to follow the rules, and the rules are there usually for good reason. And there's some ways that we can change rules when they're not there for good reason and when they're not doing what they should be doing. But it's not about following or not following the rules. It is knowing the rules better than anyone else so that you can find the space within the rules. So yes, there are certain things where, and I joke in the book, like you don't have to reinvent the rules on everything, right? You don't have to reinvent the way people do things. Accounting, don't reinvent.
Okay.
That's a bad thing to reinvent, right? Because there are very clear
Find yourself in
standards.
jail. Yes.
Right. Don't do that. And it doesn't help you at all. But there are certain things that I've found, particularly in regulatory heavy places, but also with the unwritten rules, where people assume that this is the way it has to be, or this is, people would tell me when we first started in Europe, oh, you can't hire military spouses on base. I was like, okay, why? They're like, oh, it's against the rules. Okay, which rules? And so it would have at some point come out that it was the status of forces agreement. Okay, let me go look at the status of forces agreement. And it turns out the status of forces agreement was silent about whether or not military spouses could or couldn't work. So then you go down to the next level and say, okay, what are the implementing regulations that are still rules about how this works? And that was silent. And we went, down and down and down to the implementing guidance or policies around whether or not still silent. The only thing that needed to get changed was the actual form you filled out that said, who are you? Like, what kind of visa do you need? And it was, are you this? Are you this? Are you this? And if we had a checkbox that said military spouse, that's all that was required. So I fixed it. So I literally went in and said, okay, your form, here, I've fixed the form. Here's the one line in the policy guidance that you need to change to allow for this, or the instructions on the form as well. I've taken the liberty of doing it for you so that it's easier for you to say yes than it is for you to say no.
Was there any thought as to why they wouldn't allow that to happen?
I think it's just because nobody had ever conceived of it.
Okay.
Right? I mean, back in the day, this was 20 years ago. This is not like 40 years ago. They didn't think military spouses could feasibly work at these high levels. And
see, 20 years ago, but 40, you're like, okay, I get it.
But this was, when we first started the firm, there was...
Women are in the workforce.
I mean, I had come out and I was like, I have a PhD from an Ivy League school. Thank you very much. And they had somebody literally told me, you can be a secretary until you get pregnant. And this is 2004, right?
Just wear pantyhose.
Right. Yes, and pantyhose too. That was actually in the White House. I had to. However, what it did is nobody had ever conceived of it. Nobody had ever pushed on the rules. So it wasn't that you couldn't do it. It was just that nobody thought you could. And so once you start digging into what do the rules actually say, then there's a way of either finding the space within the rules that you can do what you want to do, or if there really isn't space within the rules and it's silly that there's not space within the rules, then you work on advocacy and changing those rules.
So how would you recommend going through that kind of iterative process? I mean, I think there's a self-discovery. It's called the 7 whys. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's asking yourself, okay, why just 7 times?
Right.
It's really easy to get 3 layers deep.
Yeah.
And then you hit that 4th layer and you're like, oh my God, and you really need to sit and ponder and like, why is this happening?
Right.
Why does this make sense? It's a great process. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Don't do it all the time. It's not for everybody, but your process in terms of, okay, looking at the regulations.
Well, I call it the 2-year-old's question, right? And it's basically the same thing. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Why? Why not? Why can't I? Right. But I think you kind of still have to be really, really focused on getting to the answer. So you can't just kind of surface scratch it and say, well, I just don't want to do that. So the rules say that I don't have to, or what. You have to dig in, right? You have to really understand the rules or else you're going to get in trouble.
Yep.
And so what you need to be able to do is say, where do I find these rules? Right? What are the rules that govern this? And it's again, not just the written rules, because there are some industries where the written rules are huge. Banking is one of those, clearly, but they're not that circumscribed. They are somewhat, but there's space within the rules, even within banking. But then there's the unwritten rules of the expectations of what people think you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it. And bluntly, those are the ones you can blow through really quickly. It is just, we are not supposed to do that. Watch me. Like, I don't really care what you think I'm supposed to do.
I want to talk a little bit about that because there is this balance between conformity and nonconformity.
Yes.
Right? You come into an organization or even there in an existing organization and say, I'm going to do things differently.
Yeah.
And there is this tendency because there are cultural norms, there's organizational norms, there's patterns of behavior, written and unwritten, that you're like, hey, you get on board.
Right.
Get on the wagon with the rest of us.
Right.
So how do you navigate that process without completely alienating yourself or creating enemies?
I think you have to understand where you find yourself kind of geolocated within what organization. There are some organizations that by culture are very much unruly. They're very much the place where you can push on and say,
disruptors.
What are we thinking? How are we thinking? And there's even some of the more kind of staid places, some of the more kind of traditional places where you can do that within certain parameters and with certain people. But you have to do that conscious of the milieu you find yourself in. So in a tech firm, in AI, I'm going to be disruptive, and that's expected of me, and that's actually kind of fits within the rules, right? In banking, it's going to be a little different, but there are ways of pushing. It's just probably not quite as throw a bomb and see what pops up. There are ways of pushing within some spaces and saying, okay, why do we do that this way? Why is our process? So not the big rules, right? Not the regulatory compliance stuff, but why are we doing this process this way? Could we find another way to do it? What is the outcome we're trying to get to? And is there a different way? Is there a different path forward that isn't quite so cumbersome for us? So there's ways even in the most traditional and most kind of hamstrung places to be able to do that, I think.
So if I could dig a little deeper on that. So, banking's very traditional.
Yeah.
And I think we've done a better job as an organization to be more open-minded and recognizing like, hey, we have to evolve and adapt.
Yeah.
We were very staid, very traditional for a lot of years. And in a lot of ways we still are because we're a bank.
Right.
People trust us with their money.
Right, of course.
So we need to make sure that we're being good stewards and making good financial decisions. But encountering things like this is the way we've always done it.
Oh, God. Yes, that is the worst. Why?
So when you hit that kind of resistance, I mean, how do you kind of softly navigate through it?
So I think a couple of things. One is I tend to do people's homework for them. So if I hit that resistance of this is the way we've always done it, I understand. Can you explain where that might be? Why? What drives us to do things this way? I'd like to play around with something a little bit. Not going to take your time. Not going to do this on kind of company time. But I really just want to play around with this a little bit. Can you point me to where I might be able to find why we've done it this way so that I can kind of think through it?
Okay, so not being pushy, and to your point, kind of knowing the rules.
Yeah. But then also, again, doing their homework for them and making it easier to say yes than to say no is one of the tricks that I've always used.
Well, that's an interesting point, right? Because you're already coming across someone who has a little bit of resistance.
Right.
They don't want to do it.
Right.
Generally, people just don't want to work that hard.
Well,
And I'm
thing,
generalizing.
Right.
You're asking me to do something that's not like my normal job, and I don't want to do it.
Right. Well, and oftentimes it's because they're like, I don't see the point of this.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. We've always done it this way and it works. Leave me alone. Let me just sit and color and do what, and that's not even a bad thing. That's not pejorative in saying that. It's just, it's worked for them. So why would they try to upend that? And particularly when you're not thinking in that mindset. But if
you're not approaching it combative, right? Like you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. If you
right.
if you can come in as the disruptor and say, I really want to understand this. I mean, when I was sitting in the White House, I was 25, 26 years old, talking to people who had been doing the exact same job at progressively higher levels for 30, 40 years,
yeah.
right? And
we were here in the Ford administration. And
right, exactly. And they're like, little girl, we survive all of you people.
Yes,
shut up and color. Let me do my job. And I would approach them and go, okay, you know this better than I do. You do. Let me ask dumb questions. I'm not dumb. I know I'm not dumb. They think I'm dumb sometimes, and I'd use that to my advantage. Okay, so let me understand. Let me just, can you give me like 10 minutes? Let me understand this, and then I'll go back and
lean
process
into that.
it.
You're right. I don't understand.
You know what? That worked really well sometimes. And the other thing is that worked really well because they would trap themselves into saying something ridiculous sometimes, and then I'd catch them because I knew what I was talking about, but wanted them to explain it to me. So, but if you can do that and you can find, sometimes you can't make those changes. Sometimes it's not right to make those changes. So you don't go into this always assuming you're right and those changes are always good.
I think that's an important distinction, right? To be open-minded that you could be wrong.
I'm wrong all the time, right?
And
I am perfectly happy to be proven wrong. And okay, we're going to try this. No, we can't do that. Okay. Is there a different way? Is there a different path to get to where we want to be? Or not? Or do we need to kind of set with the status quo, and that works too.
Is there, is there more challenges with someone in a certain socioeconomic status or sex or gender that makes it harder to be unruly and disruptive? So
it's interesting. I had this conversation. I was at the WAVE, the technology incubator that I'm on the board for. And there was a Women of WAVE event that I was sitting and having a conversation with these tech founders that were all women. And I was joking around that I used humor to diffuse a lot of situations. And I do. And it works really well for me. Mm-hmm. And one of the women raised her hand and said, you know what, that doesn't work for me as a Black woman. Mm. And she was like, I will get labeled differently for the same joke. So we actually sat as a group and unpacked that in a way that I thought was really cool, because it was, okay, you're right. I have a different background than you do. I get to do things very differently because of some of the privilege that I have in kind of how I present. And so I can be a little more irreverent. But I can't be as irreverent as some men can be as well. Or I have to play the gender card a little differently, or the way that I present myself. So I think, yes, there is. And as much as it's not fair, as much as it's not right, it is what it is. And while we work to change it through kind of the advocacy process, we also just have to realize, here's the world in which we live. Let's figure out together. And hopefully, with me kind of helping or talking to some of these women, we got to a place where they could figure out together how to manage those situations differently than I did, and maybe take some of the stuff that I had done and we could tweak it. But I think we have to recognize the world in which we live and then work to change the world.
I also think, and I'm going to agree with all of that on the front end when relationships are new.
Yeah.
Because we all come into it with the bias, whether we like to or not, as much as we want to remain objective. I mean, we look through a lens, our personal experience, our backgrounds. So we're judgment machines. I like to say all the time, we constantly judge, and you're like, okay, I have a bias here, like ignore it if I can. Once you get to know someone, I think it's a completely different game, right? So then you can approach it with humor, and in a comfortable situation, you're pushing on something.
Yes, but there still is some stuff, and I think I don't understand all of it, and you don't understand all of it, because it's not our lived experience. So kind of a related thing, I was talking about imposter syndrome the other day, and somebody turned to me and said, hey, Black women in particular experience this very differently than white women. And so I called one of my best friends who's a judge in town who's Black, and I was like, do you experience the imposter syndrome? And she said, yeah, I absolutely do. And so I was like, okay, I thought you did. And then she backed up and she said, hold on a second. What do you mean by imposter syndrome? Because here's what I mean by it. And I think we might have different definitions. Once we started kind of unpackaging it, she means she thinks other people think she's an imposter. I walk into a situation, and as accomplished as I have been, I will turn around and be like, I don't deserve to be here. She walks into a room and she's like, I know I deserve to be here because I've worked 10 times harder than anyone else to get here. But there are people here who don't think I deserve to be here. And it was like it was mind-blowing for some crazy reason. I've been talking about imposter syndrome for 30 years, since I was, getting a PhD in psychology. And yet I didn't know how different people experienced it. I just assumed everyone had the same.
That's really fascinating. And I think so. I mean, what is the definition? Because you're extremely successful, right? And so you have every right to be anywhere you need to be. But to me, that's self-doubt. It's not an imposter system. It's self-doubt. Or to me, at least the way I would interpret it, that's more of...
So under the research, the way that it's defined in kind of psychology research is around these very high achieving women who have absolute fear that they're going to be discovered as an imposter.
Okay.
Right. So I just recently I put out a newsletter.
To me, that's insecurity. Self-doubt, it's insecurity.
It's not. Yes-ish. It is a weird, it is insecurity, or I'm not insecure. I'm not. At this point in my life, and I also don't suffer.
I have not known you to be insecure.
Right.
Yes.
But I will tell you, when I am pushing into a new realm, it's a signal to me that I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet. And so to me, I'm using it as a kind of red flag of I need a little bit more. I need to figure out what I'm doing. But a lot of women, particularly white women, it turns out, suffer from feeling like somebody's going to discover them. And insecurity is a piece of it. It's not the whole of it. But that's what the traditional imposter syndrome research is around. These women that should be able to own their space, their place at the table, who are like, somebody's going to figure out I didn't actually earn my way here. But it's funny that somehow, and there's some good psychological research that I went and dug into after I had this conversation, that there's a way for Black women to actually manage their self-esteem in doing this so that they can be in places where they are getting discriminated against. I'm not getting discriminated against in the same ways. So I almost have the space to be able to be insecure, imposter, right? They don't. They have to own it. And they have to know that they deserve to be there because everyone else is wondering if they deserve to be there.
And not in that example specifically,
right.
But I mean, there are cases where people probably shouldn't be in the spot. They're just not that good yet. And they find themselves in that job. It's not really an imposter syndrome, is it?
No, I think, I mean, there's lots of people that end up in spaces where they shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. Usually those aren't the people who are worried about not being where they're supposed to be. They're perfectly happy to be there, right?
Interesting. Okay.
I have seen so many people, and oftentimes, not to get too gendered, but oftentimes it is men who are like, I'm here. I have absolutely no business being here, but I don't even realize I have no business being here because I think I'm the smartest one in the room. But that's not the imposter syndrome. The piece of the imposter syndrome that's really critical is this idea that everyone else around you sees your ability to be there and your kind of deservedness to be there. And really, it's you that's turning around going, why is everyone thinking I should be here? So I talk in the book about the people who don't suffer from the imposter syndrome. And one of them is the person who is just so non-introspective that they don't think they could possibly not know something.
Right.
And then there's the other guy
narcissist.
Yeah. And then there's the other one who's got high self-esteem, but it's very variable. So what happens is there's an ego threat that comes if somebody kind of questions them and they get very, very defensive. So they're, I think, the most toxic of the people who don't suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Because they make everyone around them suffer from their imposter syndrome that
toxic,
they're not
very much
introspective enough to realize.
Now, why do you think it's imposter syndrome, women struggle with it more than men struggle with it? Why do you think that is?
I think
PhD
we've always been told we have to be perfect in order to do something. So when I was early in my career, I would look at jobs that I was going to apply for, and I felt like I had to do everything perfectly on that job description before I got there. My brother looked at me and said, no, if you can do everything on that job description, you're looking at the wrong job. And I think, and we came out of the same house, right? We're the same, same parents, same basic education, all that kind of stuff. He's looking at it and going, I'm going to stretch. I'm looking at it going, I have to be perfect. And so I think there's some socialization there that women tend to expect to have to do everything perfectly. And I think that's where, if we can break out of that, that's where women actually start soaring, is when they're like, I'm going to show up and do as best I can, and I'm probably going to do better than the other 3 people around me, and that's going to be good enough. So,
okay. Well, the other thing that men and women differ from a little bit is work-life balance.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? That's another thing you talk about.
Yes.
Men generally aren't asked.
No, starting to get better.
Okay.
Starting to get better.
I've only been asked once.
Okay.
So Alexis Molnar with the Tampa Bay Business Journal.
Alexis is really good about that.
It was great. He asked me, and I'm like, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
It does not. I think what I've started conceiving of, because I used to have that glib answer of, it just doesn't exist, right? So stop trying. But that doesn't help anyone actually manage through the challenges. So a couple of things that I've started talking about around work-life balance. The first is I call it equilibrium rather than balance.
I like that.
The way that I look at it is balance is almost a teeter-totter with a fulcrum there, and you're either in balance or something comes off somewhere, something goes wrong, and you go entirely off balance. And you have to go back to that exact same balance that you were at before because the fulcrum hasn't changed. Whereas if you kind of go back to like high school biology class, equilibrium, osmosis. There's a dynamic equilibrium in osmosis where things are going in and out of the cell. It's expected that things are moving, things are changing.
Fluid, yeah.
When you change them, when you throw something in there that changes the dynamic entirely, so the osmosis is no longer working, the equilibrium is no longer balanced, it goes to a new equilibrium quickly. But the expectation is that it's fluid and dynamic. So I feel like if we call it equilibrium rather than balance, for me, that's a gut check of I expect it to always be
in flux.
Yes.
Oh.
And then the other thing that I have been talking about a lot lately is being ruthlessly curating your priorities. So when somebody asks you, what's your priority, right? My kids are my priority, right? They are. They absolutely are. But not every little aspect of my kids has to be my priority. And so I've been talking a lot lately about when my kids were little and they had the spirit weeks in nursery school and in elementary school. And some people loved this stuff.
Yeah, they go all out. Yes.
They went all out. And it was so much fun to watch, and they were so cool, and these costumes were ridiculous.
Yes.
But they were so much fun to see. I couldn't care about those. I, first of all, didn't care about them. That's just not how I'm built. But I couldn't care about them because I had other priorities. So my kids were my priority, but their costumes weren't. But the critical piece of that is really important is then you have to own what you've chosen.
Yes.
So that when you see little Susie or little Johnny on Pinterest or on Facebook in their adorable costumes, you can turn around and say, oh my God, I love that Julie did this. And I didn't do it, and that's okay because it wasn't my priority. It was Julie's priority. It wasn't mine, and I'm okay with that.
And I think, I'm so glad you have said all this because I think that's the missing piece of that whole dilemma where when people say, and I know this is going to sound very unempathetic, but they struggle with like work-life balance. And I'm like, it's just because you're not really good at both.
Right.
You're just not good. But part of that process is how do you get good? And that is what are your values? What are your priorities? And then keeping that in perspective as you're making decisions that you can't do everything. It's not humanly possible.
And sometimes you're going to be completely out of whack. Something is going to go wrong no matter what happens. And you're going to have to flex. I mean, when I've got aging parents, when everything drops when my dad breaks another hip, right? And we just drop it and we figure it out.
Right.
And so all of the priorities that I had to then have to shift.
Yes.
But I think, so when people are saying I'm not doing well at work-life balance, in an immediate time, sometimes it's going to be overwhelming and that's okay. And so I think you kind of have to accept that as well and look at it at that
generalization.
Moment. Yes. Right. But you have to, when it's not working, either at one moment in time that isn't a crisis or across multiple domains, one domain continues to be kind of short-shrifted, then you need to figure out how to cull more of those priorities so that you don't have so many. Can you outsource? Can you do it worse than perfect? Can you not do it at all? What really matters, because you can't possibly do everything, but you gotta just accept that.
And I will say things like, and I know this sounds maybe a little elitist, and not everybody is in a position to be able to do this, but part of that outsourcing process is getting to a point to where I find like cleaning the house very therapeutic. I love it.
Oh God.
I have OCD, so
that's all, my husband does too, which is great.
And there's this mental math. It's like, why am I paying? We now have a housekeeper, right? Why am I paying for something that I could do for free and actually get some enjoyment out of it? But all the time that it frees up for me to be able to do those other priorities, like spend time with my kids, coach hockey. I've got a demanding job. You've got to figure out what your highest and best use is at any given moment. And then you've got to be comfortable. And this is something my husband also is a little OCD and likes cleaning, and gets very frustrated if it's not done to his standard. So he'll ask my daughter to do something. She legitimately doesn't see what he sees. And so she'll clean up and he'll come down and be like, this is not clean. I'm like, you outsource this to her. You got to be okay with it. So you've got to be okay with their best is not going to be your best. And that's okay. That's okay. At least they go through the effort. Like very specific examples, like unloading the dishwasher.
Yes.
Things end up and it's like a treasure hunt. I have no idea where it is, but I didn't have to do it.
Yes.
So I'm thankful. I'll come behind and just move things around.
Yeah. And then it's at least a little bit better.
Yes. Okay. So when does being unruly become counterproductive? So
I think there is a space where if you try to upend every single rule all the time, you've got a problem, right? There are a lot of things that you can do as the status quo. Like I said, accounting, don't change that. It takes lots of effort. It takes lots of energy to be unruly, to upend what everyone else is doing. So finding the places that it actually makes the most sense to do it, that's the place I think that you put that energy in. You can't put that energy into every single thing, or else you're going to have no work-life balance. You're going to have no life because you're just going to die because it's just too exhausting to upend everything. Yeah. You've got systems in place. You've got, HR. I would not upend the HRIS system. Use a standard HRIS. Don't come up with your own unless that is what you're disrupting specifically, but then don't disrupt everything else, right? So there's got to be places that you choose to do that.
No, I love it. I mean, great advice. Want to talk about your podcast before we wrap it up? So, the Unruly podcast.
The Unruly podcast.
So tell me about it. How did that come about?
We had a podcast years ago in the company around government contracting, and I loved doing it. And so as I was kind of putting Unruly to bed and figuring out what we were doing with it, one of the things I realized is I've got all of these great Unruly leaders that have different stories of how they upended the status quo. And so I was like, why don't we just bring them on and talk to them about how they got unruly? So we've had, the former IRS commissioner who hired me into my first job.
And he can get unruly? I thought to me, that's one of those things.
He is actually super unruly.
Okay.
He is very rule-based, clearly. He's a policy wonk by training, but he knows how to get things done within the rules. He's probably one of my first unruly role models.
Okay.
Because I've known him since I was in the White House. Amy Martinez Monfort at Tampa Laundry Company, who came to the podcast with the bottom half of her drywall still gone.
Oh yeah, the hurricane damage. Yes.
Right, and so, but yet is the most positive person I think I've ever known. And so she's sitting with no drywall and talking about how grateful she is.
And also someone got into a very traditional industry, and part of that unruly
and
part.
Totally upended it. Yes.
No, when I'm friends with her husband Luis, and when he was telling me what they were doing, I'm like, you're doing what?
Yes.
Why?
I started hearing about this woman before I met her.
Maybe we should explain the business so everybody knows.
So Tampa Laundry Company is what it sounds like. It's a laundromat first and foremost that she took and scaled to totally different heights, but she got the laundry contract on base, having never done anything with government contracting, knowing no one in the space. She got into the rules. She figured out, she's a lawyer, so she figured out the FAR by herself, wrote this proposal by herself, and won. And nobody does that. Nobody does that in government contracting. That's just not heard of. So I met her after I had been hearing about her, and just her positivity makes everyone want to see her succeed. Mm-hmm. And I think her power of positivity is her superpower.
Well, an ability to be unruly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's totally unruly. She's awesome. So we have a bunch of unruly guests that are kind of in that space that can show us all of the different pieces of unruly.
That's great. Anything else you want anybody to know, Lauren, before we wrap it up?
No, come to the launch party. Come read the book. We're gonna have lots of stuff on my newsletter, so sign up for the newsletter on my website. But I'm just loving having these conversations because I think it's really important for people to hear how to upend the path that they're on without ever breaking the rules.
I love it. Get the book. Congratulations. What's the website?
LaurenWittenbergWeiner.com. And I know that's a really long name, but it's Lauren, Lauren, Wittenberg, Wittenberg, WEINER.com.
No hyphen.
No hyphen. Okay. All one word.
All together. Great. Well, Lauren, thanks for coming on Money Market.
Thank you so much.
You can find Money Market and Bank of Tampa online and on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you around in the Money Market.